Hello everyone and welcome back to this channel. Hope you guys all having an amazing day so far. So in this video we'll be creating another modern family home within The Sims 4, but this time I'm actually focusing on creating and building this home with like my favorite design and style for the exterior, which is sort of just like this nice plain white walls going around the entire home with this very nice detailed sort of contrasting roof texture that we have going on throughout the entire home. And if you have been a member of the channel for quite a while now, you probably have seen my past 2, 3, 4 videos now, which sort of have this like very nice and similar sort of modern family home design that I'm trying to go for. And the main idea behind that is mainly because like I wanted to create this sort of like neighborhood sort of environment where like most of the homes like looked relatively similar, but they weren't exactly the same or identical, if that makes sense. And the main idea behind that was sort of just like if you were playing with multiple families and you wanted to incorporate them within the same neighborhood, you could put them in like those homes and they could all just like live together, if that makes sense. And I believe I feel like it would kind of make sense to end it off with this final last one that I feel like looked really nice and sort of like fit the idea that I was trying to go with. And I wasn't really planning to create or make this into a series, but I feel like it kind of made sense because the homes do sort of like look relatively the same and I feel like they look really nice and appealing. And yeah, this is sort of just like the final one that I thought I could just like create for you guys. And this is actually inspired by a real life home. So yeah, if you have noticed like certain parts of it, it is based on a real life home, but it's not really one-to-one because I had to alter some stuff because they wouldn't really fit on the lot, or I just changed it up because I feel like it might have looked better doing it a different way or whatnot. And when you're like recreating a home and stuff like that, it's not really going to end up one-to-one either because, you know, you don't really have the exact same tools. So yeah, it just wouldn't end up exactly the same. So yeah, there was quite a few adjustments, but I feel like overall the same sort of like structure and like you get the idea basically of like what it kind of looks like. And I really loved how this home in particular had this very detailed sort of like roof piece that sort of just like extended out into the garden area, which some sort of like enclosed patio area, and I just feel like that looked really interesting. So I was really motivated to sort of just like incorporate something like that within this build as well. And I just really love the shaping of this build in particular because it had quite an odd shape to it, but I feel like it worked out really nicely in the end, especially for the interior, because you would notice as we progress later in the video to the interior, you'll see how like we have such a unique looking layout, but it flows really well because it's not necessarily like an open floor plan, but it's not really closed at all either. So your Sims can like navigate the space and stuff like that really easily without, you know, like having to like walk around too much. There's not really a lot of like negative space throughout the entire home either because we're sort of just like working with this L shape, and I really wanted to utilize as much of the space as possible. And yeah, so once we get into that, you will probably see like how much room we have and how much space we have throughout the entire home. But right now, focusing on the exterior, we pretty much have the entire exterior already done, and I just really loved how it just looked. I feel like it looked really nice and appealing, and I loved how we had that L shape that was like enclosed onto the garden area. It sort of just like made it feel like it was like a private oasis area, and we do actually add so much greenery throughout the entire area to the point where it feels really hidden, and I just really love how it looked. And if you guys do actually end up planning to place this build onto a different lot as well, and I feel like it will look really nicely in whatever lot that you place it in, as long as it is a 50 by 40 of course. But I feel like it turned out really nice overall. And we are actually utilizing one of my favorite roof textures, which is sort of just like this corrugated metal roof texture, which I feel like looks really nice, and I just really love utilizing it in most of my builds because I feel like it looks the most appealing. It doesn't really have that really sharp contrasting look to it or like color to it, but it works out so nicely because it has these very nice simple detailings and it doesn't really look too harsh on the eye, if that makes sense. And this one actually came with Eco Lifestyle, I believe, and it's just like one of my favorite expansion packs when it comes to creating these modern homes in general anyway. And I also went with this really nice white thick roof trim piece throughout this all of the roof, and I feel like that looks really interesting overall for this build in particular. I don't really use it in a lot of my builds, but I feel like it works a lot nicer on smaller builds to make them stand out and just like pop a bit more, if that makes sense. But for this build in particular, I feel like it worked out really nicely, and it just like helped with adding that extra detail that this house necessarily needed, if that makes sense. And we do actually have a few sort of like pockets that sort of just like extend outside of the main exterior of the home, which had this like different sort of like accent wall pieces, which I feel like also looked really interesting as well, such as like these very nice black rooms that we had going on across the entire home as well, which I feel like looked really interesting and sort of broke up that same sort of like similar pattern that you saw throughout the entire home, which is like plain white walls going across the entire home. I feel like these small little pockets that sort of like poke out from the main area of the home with different colors embedded within the walls just make it look a bit more interesting and sort of like makes it look and feel a bit more dynamic. And for the main windows and doors that we go for this home in particular come from the greenhouse haven kit, I believe, and the base game sort of like sliding glass windows, and the most recent update which came with those like new windows and doors and stuff like that. Those are like the main things I actually utilize for the windows throughout this entire home, and I just really love how they look overall, because it sort of just like has this very modern and simplistic theme feel to it. And if there is something available in the base game that I know looks really similar to one that looks in an expansion pack, I'm obviously going to use the one that came from base game, because it's just going to be a lot more accessible, if that makes sense. But yeah, as I mentioned like earlier, there's a few pockets throughout the entire home which sort of like have their own accent walls, such as like this very nice detailed sort of black metal sort of like wall detailing going on throughout certain parts of the home, which I feel like look really interesting. I do believe the one where the garage is sort of changes to a different color, but besides that, pretty much all of the rest of them pretty much like stay the same, and I feel like it just looks really nice overall. And I really wanted to utilize this main front door which came from the Business and Hobbies expansion pack, which has this very interesting looking arch on top of it. And since a lot of the windows on the door itself had this like cross design, and it worked really nicely with the rest of the windows that I was utilizing throughout the entire home, so I feel like it kind of made sense to utilize it within this home itself. And especially since it came in that black and white color swatch, I really wanted to utilize it because that is like the main color scheme that I was trying to go for this home in particular anyway. But yeah, if you guys do have a different preference for like windows and stuff like that, you guys can let me know in the comment sections below, preferably to the one similar to the greenhouse haven one, because I really love these ones in particular. But I feel like not a lot of people would probably invest or buy the greenhouse haven kit, because I feel like unless you really want to make like a really realistic looking garden, if that makes sense. But I just really love utilizing those windows in particular because they work so well, especially since they come in all the different wall heights. It really does come in super handy for builders like me who want to create something that looks really nice and interesting on every single wall height level, rather than being restricted to one all the time. And that's pretty much like the same excuse for that base game sliding door. I just love that it comes in that medium wall height as well. It just gives a lot more opportunity for the player to create and do whatever they want to. But yeah, so this back garden area has this very nice and interesting looking sort of like checkered, it's like a very light and muted sort of checkered sort of like square tiled sort of design for the back garden area. It's not really checkered, but it sort of had like these odd colored ones going in between throughout all of them, which I feel like made it look a bit more interesting rather than having like a plain, you know, like white tiled one or gray tiled one going on throughout the entire home. I feel like it looked really nicer overall. And I did also utilize this basement sort of like floor texture throughout certain parts of the home where I wanted like soil to be, because I really just love how this like floor texture itself sort of like pops out a lot more rather than the terrain paint, if that makes sense. The terrain paint sort of like feels a bit muted, and sometimes it doesn't really look that great in certain areas. But for this home, I really wanted like these really strict, minimal and simplistic looking lines, so I really had to utilize a tile itself rather than utilizing the terrain paint. But of course we do actually utilize a terrain paint, as you guys can see right now. We do actually go throughout the entire home and like soften it out throughout the edges, as well as like creating different colored like greenery throughout the entire home as well. But I couldn't really include a lot of that in because there was just like a lot of detail going on throughout this entire home. But I highly recommend you guys to stick around towards the end of the video where you can see the tour, as well as like if you want to see it on the gallery as well, in case you are interested in seeing all of the details and whatnot. I will also provide a bird's eye view sort of like screenshot of the entire home in case you guys want to see what it actually looks like overall. But yeah, where this swimming pool area was, I really wanted to incorporate a nice sort of like jacuzzi area, and the way I just did that was just by like placing a basement below it and then placing the jacuzzi on top of that sort of basement floor, if that makes sense, and sort of just like making it poke up on purpose rather than leaving it embedded into the ground in hopes that it will probably be functional. But even if it wasn't really functional, I wouldn't really mind it because I feel like it looked really nice there anyway, and especially since you already have the pool, I feel like you wouldn't really need the jacuzzi anyway. But yeah, for this area of the garden area, I wanted to create this sort of custom sort of fireplace area with these very simple sort of like square lines going across the actual fireplace itself, which I feel like looked really nice and was sort of just like a nice, unique and interesting take on creating a custom fireplace. And we do actually add some additional garden furniture pieces around the fireplace itself as well, which you'll see later in the video as well. But yeah, we go for this very nice and simple suntan beds on this sort of like section of the patio tiled area, and I really love how it sort of divides itself from the main parts of the tiles from that soil. I feel like it's kind of just like a nice and interesting take, especially since it's something unique. It's not something that I would relatively do often. And I did also just like go around the entire home and just like place some nice potted plants around the entire home as well. And we do actually populate a lot of the soil with a bunch of greenery as well. We do add like a lot of trees and just like a lot of greenery to make it feel as lively as possible. So yeah, here I pretty much like added a lot of these like nice palm trees that you would already see throughout this entire world itself anyway, as well as adding quite a lot of these like tropical plants throughout this entire home, as well as like a nice fence that sort of just like acted as if it was like a realistic sort of privacy gate. And yeah, just sort of just like trying to add some like additional highlights into the soil and the ground to make it feel a bit more realistic, as well as like adding some small kid friendly sort of like swings and monkey bars. But yeah, moving on into the interior now, I started off by sort of like decorating and detailing the front foyer area, which has this very nice sort of like simplistic design to it. And we had quite a lot of these like walls poking into the front foyer itself, so I wanted to just utilize some nice unique looking accent walls throughout this entire home, as well as of course adding the new alarms and the thermostat and whatnot, just to like add some additional functionality into the game if you guys do have seasons. And I wanted this like very nice sort of like nice simple table area, which had like a lot of these like nice simple mirrors as well, just like so you can see yourself before you go out the door, just like trying to add some like realism, even though your Sims wouldn't really do that. I feel like it's just like a nice added touch of like realism that I really love incorporating in a lot of my homes, because I feel like a lot of people do like these like more realistic takes rather than having a lot of these like cartoonish ones. I know there's a few people who would probably prefer like a more cartoonish or like fake environment, but I really like going for this like more realistic theme and vibe, if that makes sense. But yeah, moving on into the living space area, which is like pretty much like right next to where the front entrance area is, so there's not really like a lot of empty space throughout that entire area, if that makes sense. And I really loved how this living space turned out overall, because I actually utilized certain pieces that I feel like I wouldn't usually use. So I'm actually using those armchairs, which probably really aren't even armchairs because they don't have like arms itself, but they came from the Lovestruck expansion pack, and I just really love how they look because they look really modern and simple. And I also utilized these Life and Death expansion pack 2-seaters as well, and I just placed like 3 right next to each other, just like trying to create a fake L-shaped design, which I feel like looked really nice overall. And I did actually incorporate a bit of color throughout this entire home as well, so you'd see a lot of color coming on from certain parts of the home. And I've actually been quite brave and I actually utilized quite a lot of color throughout most of the bedrooms, which you would see later in the video as well. But yeah, I just tried to add a lot of greenery and just like try to make it feel as live as possible throughout this entire home, rather than leaving it really dull, because we are actually working with the tallest wall height, because I just really like the medium and taller wall height rather than using the shortest wall height. I just feel like there's like a lot more to add and just like do if you have a taller wall height, and I feel like it's better just like for gameplay as well, just like you can see a lot more as well, in my opinion. And yeah, it just like adds to the overall like grandness and the style that I was trying to go for anyway. So yeah, I feel like overall just like going for these like taller wall heights just make it look and feel a bit more interesting. And yeah, so I just utilized these very nice and simple Desert Luxe kit sort of hanging curtains, which I also utilized the furniture pieces for the exterior as well from the Desert Luxe kit as well. So yeah, that is also just like the main one that I actually utilized for the outdoor sort of furniture placement as well, which I just really love utilizing because it just like sort of fit that modern theme that I was trying to go for. And of course I just went back and just like added some additional clutter into the living space area, and we do actually have a few pieces throughout this entire home which sort of just like have this very nice bright bold bluish color to it. So that is sort of just like the main color scheme, along with the beiges and the whites and the blacks that we have going on throughout this entire home. And that is sort of just like the main goal that I love creating when it comes to like these modern family homes. And I want to add this very nice simple shelf right at the back of where these like 2 sofas were, just to like add some additional details to it, just to like make it feel a bit more full and like lively. But yeah, moving on into the kitchen area, I feel like this kitchen turned out to be relatively unique because it really doesn't feel like a kitchen that I have built before. It just feels really unique and interesting to be like almost like in the center of the home, but it's also like really boxy and sort of enclosed in. And I actually just utilize these spandrels across like certain areas of the home to like open it up a bit more, rather than just like sort of utilizing the archway, even though we actually utilized quite a few archways throughout this entire home. But I feel like it turned out really nice overall. And we are actually utilizing the Life and Death wall cabinets for this kitchen area in particular, just to like make it feel a bit more built in. But we do actually end up changing the cabinets itself to the ones that came from the base game, because I feel like since they look really similar, I feel like it kind of made sense to just utilize the base game ones instead. And that was better for the style of the home anyway, because I was trying to go for a more contrasting looking countertop anyway, because I wanted a black countertop with these white cabinets below it, but instead the Life and Death one didn't actually come with that anyway. So I feel like it kind of made sense to change it to the other ones instead. And we do also have a few gold accents throughout this entire home as well, which I believe the oven came from the Grown Together expansion pack, along with the hood range for it as well. So I wanted stuff to like also match as well, rather than having everything look a bit too like distinctive, if that makes sense. So yeah, I feel like it made the kitchen look a bit more like grand and fancy overall as well. And despite me utilizing the base game cabinets for the main area of the home, I did actually keep the wall ones to be from the Life and Death one, because they fit the vibe that I was trying to go for a lot more, in my opinion. And for the island counters for this home in particular, I wanted to actually go for something that looked a bit more different, and once again incorporating some color into the home, because as you are probably already aware, we're going for this more modern and minimalistic theme, but with that sort of just like comes with like a lot of these simple colors, and I didn't really want that. I wanted to incorporate some color into this home regardless. So instead I went with these island counter pieces, of course the same ones from the base game, but in a blue swatch, because I feel like it looked a lot more interesting to just like add a bit of color into this area, even if it wasn't like 100% like adding to the aesthetic that we were exactly going for. I still feel like it looked really nice overall. And as I mentioned, we do have quite a few like color schemes going on throughout this entire home, and the main one being blue as well, as you have seen in the living space itself as well. And we do also have these very nice lit up sort of shelves going across like where the sink unit area is, as well as like that corner piece area, which I feel like looks really nice and interesting, and also just like a nice unique take for this kitchen itself. And right next to the entrance of the home as well, we do actually have quite a spacious looking bathroom as well, and we just populate it with the generic stuff such as like the simple sink, as well as like a nice fancy shower, a bathtub, as well as like a nice simple toilet. And I actually went with a more unique approach for the countertop right next to where the bathroom sink is. So instead I actually utilized a corner piece from the Dream Home Decorator kit and sort of like placed it right next to it, because although it is a relatively spacious bathroom, there's not really that much space to add on either side. So instead I just added a very small sort of corner piece, which I feel like worked really nicely, and it might actually be something that I would also do in my future builds as well. But yeah, moving on into the laundry area, which is only accessible once you pass through that sort of bathroom area. You have to pass the bathroom in order to go into the laundry, although I still feel like it kind of makes sense, because you know the laundry is sort of just like to do with cleaning anyway, so it sort of just like kind of makes sense to utilize both of those rooms in this sort of like small corner area. My initial plan was to actually do it through the kitchen, but I didn't really want to add some like additional doors into the kitchen. I feel like it wouldn't really have made as much sense anyway. But yeah, we went for like a nice simple minimalistic theme for that laundry room as well. But yeah, moving on into the first bedroom that we have on the first floor, which looks straight out into the back garden area, which I feel like looks really nice overall. I wanted to keep it very formal and very like luxurious and elegant, so I wanted to utilize these very nice paneled walls, but only on the backside where the sort of like bed is laying on top of it. And I feel like that looked really nice overall, and it just like gave this very elegant looking feel to it. And I just utilized the walking wardrobe sort of like closet area that sort of like builds into the wall, and I feel like that just like saved quite a lot of space, especially since we're working with such a small footprint for that bedroom itself. But yeah, so moving on into the second bedroom that we have on the first floor. Now we actually classifying this one as the main sort of like master bedroom, and the main reason for that is because it sort of like has access to the back garden area directly, along with having their own sort of walk-in wardrobe area, as well as like their own ensuite area as well, which I feel like is kind of like extra, and it's not really something that all the bedrooms within this home have. So I feel like since this one has like the most functionality added to it, I feel like it's kind of makes sense to classify this one as like the main primary bedroom, if that makes sense. And I just really added a lot of like these like nice simple details, as well as like a nice sort of like seating area and a fireplace, because it worked so nicely with having that fireplace on the exterior. So it matched really well with like placing the bed exactly where it was, and just like adding some very nice simple clutter and furniture pieces throughout this entire bedroom, which I feel like made it look really interesting. And since we are actually utilizing the tall wall height, and you can't really add a lot of stuff to like the top part of the wall which would really make sense or really be accessible, I just actually placed some like accent walls throughout this entire home in certain parts where I feel like kind of felt bland or empty, and that sort of just like helped with sort of adding to that negative space, if that makes sense. So that's like my best advice that I could probably give if you guys were like having one wall in particular that looked really plain and simple. I would probably just like add a specific wallpaper or wall detailing that would sort of like make it feel a bit different and just like add to the uniqueness of it, so it just like wouldn't really feel as plain and boring as you would probably like envision or think it would look like, if that makes sense. But yeah, so this is like the small walk-in wardrobe area, and although this space is relatively small, it doesn't really matter too much, especially since you don't really need to utilize every single shelving unit in order for the game to be functional, if that makes sense. So I feel like it really didn't matter if the walk-in wardrobe area was relatively smaller. I feel like the other spaces throughout this entire home, such as like the ensuite and the rest of the rooms, being a bit more bigger, sort of like felt and made a lot more sense, to be honest, especially since if you do not really care about like having a more realistic looking design to it, I feel like it kind of makes sense to keep those non-functioning or less functioning rooms a little smaller than the rest of the home, if that makes sense. But yeah, moving on into their ensuite, I feel like this looked really nice and glamorous, mainly because I just really loved the design of this sort of bathroom itself overall. And if you have actually seen my previous videos, you'll probably notice that I actually love utilizing the floating sink unit that actually came from the Dream Home Decorator game pack, which comes with like floating sink unit, and I just really love utilizing that. And for this build in particular, I didn't really utilize that in like most of the areas of the home, because I wanted to differentiate myself from, you know, utilizing always the same object pieces and whatnot. And this one came from the most recent business and hobbies expansion pack, so I feel like it kind of made sense to incorporate it within this build in particular. And I also utilize this sort of like triangular shaped sort of jacuzzi spa sort of bathtub, which I don't really utilize often in most of my builds, because I feel like I don't really get the opportunity to, because I create a lot of these like more smaller looking bathrooms. But since it kind of like fit in this ensuite itself, I feel like it kind of made sense to just like add it into this bathroom, which I feel like looked really nice overall, especially since they also have a huge shower as well. But yeah, moving on into the completely other side of the home, which has access directly into where the back garden area is as well, we do also have a mixture of this sort of like lounge sort of office area. And I just really love how this space in particular turned out, because usually I love creating my office spaces in like a designated space where there's like, where it's only specifically focused on like creating the office area and like adding a bunch of bookshelves and like a nice simple seating area. But this one incorporated a very spacious looking bar area, which sort of had this like outhouse bit as well, which I feel like looked really interesting, especially since we had a sort of barbecue bar area on the other side of where that huge window area is as well, which I feel like kind of was like an indoor outdoor sort of situation, even though you can't really do that in the sim. That was sort of just like the main goal that I was trying to replicate within the build itself. And we do also have another spacious sort of like lounging area right behind where the office unit table area is, which I feel like looks really interesting overall. And of course we also went for a modern approach for this room itself as well, which I feel like looked really nice overall. But I wasn't really happy with how the wallpapers were looking, because I feel like it looked really bland and it wasn't really adding to the entire environment overall. Even if I added a lot of clutter into the room, I feel like it still looked a bit pale, especially with like a lot of these like plain white walls going across the entire home. So I wanted to incorporate some of this very nice black detailed paneling, which I feel like looked really nice overall. It just made it feel a bit more elegant and interesting. So I only added it to the section where we have the TV unit area, but I still feel like that helped balance the overall room out nicely, because I feel like we had a lot of like black detailed and furnitures going on across at the front of the sort of office area, but we didn't really have a lot of those like darker colors towards like the back of the sort of like lounge area. And I feel like that sort of wallpaper color change sort of helped balance that out, if that makes sense. And yeah, so I just added some additional greenery throughout this entire room, as well as like some additional clutter pieces, just trying to change some of the color swatches to make it feel and choose what colors would work best for this room itself in particular as well, because I wanted to keep it nice and minimal, but I didn't want to keep it like all bland, plain white and simple. I still wanted to incorporate some color into it throughout the room as much as I could. So yeah, I just added some additional rugs and just like some additional detailing where I thought was kind of like necessary. And of course I just added some additional furniture and clutter pieces on top of the walls and the shelving units to make it feel a bit more full, rather than having a lot of like these like plain white walls. But yeah, moving on into the second floor now, we actually have a bathroom right as you enter the second floor, along with 3 different bedrooms for this floor in particular itself as well. So yeah, so first we start off with this very nice and simple looking bathroom, just utilizing some nice simple pieces. Didn't really add too much detailing to it because we didn't really have a lot of space to play around with anyway. I just added some additional sort of like small clutter pieces on top of the sink itself, as well as a nice simple accent wall, which I feel like made it look a bit more interesting. And then we move on into the nursery area, which actually has a fireplace, and I don't really know if that would be really that realistic, because I don't know if you would want a fireplace within your nursery, but I feel like it kind of made sense for this room itself, because I feel like we're going for a more extravagant feel. So I feel like it kind of made sense to just like leave it in here, especially since we did actually have a fireplace going across on the actual like roof itself. So it was kind of like realistic to keep it there, and I didn't really mind it there, to be honest. But yeah, I feel like it added a nice simple touch to the room overall. And I just went with like my favorite sort of like color scheme and like favorite wallpapers when I usually create my nurseries, which is like this very nice and simple sort of dinosaur wallpaper with the grass, and just like also incorporating some of the storybook nursery wallpaper as well, just like as like an accent wall to where the sort of like crib itself is, as well as like adding some additional clutter into the space itself, such as the rocking chair, as well as like some additional functional kids objects that you would obviously want to utilize if you do actually end up playing in this house itself as well. But yeah, moving on into the final bedroom that I'll actually be showing you guys within this speed build, we're actually going for a more simplistic looking bedroom, but this actually ends up changing quite a lot because I was going for this more modern and minimalistic looking theme, as you guys can probably see from the color swatches that I've been choosing all this time. But this actually ends up completely changing because I wanted to experiment and just like utilize different colors. So I actually found this rug, which I feel like looked really interesting, with these like very bright oranges and dark blues and blacks and grays, and I feel like that looked really nice, especially with the color swatch that I had for this bed that I have chosen in particular. And I just based all of the furniture objects that I was utilizing off of that rug, so just like utilizing some armchairs that had this very dark sort of orangey color to it, as well as like the black armchairs that had these arms on it, and I feel like it just like worked out really nicely overall. And this bedroom does actually have its own ensuite as well, and I also utilized the Dream Home Decorator modular pieces to create its own sort of like wardrobe area built in into the room itself as well. But yeah, so moving on into the bathroom area for this bedroom itself, we did also keep it very nice and simple as well. Of course, we had quite a lot of room to work with since it was relatively spacious, so I kind of gave myself the opportunity to utilize two different sinks on either side of the bathtub, which I feel like made it look a bit more extravagant in my opinion. And once again, I am actually utilizing the sinks that came from the Businesses and Hobbies expansion pack as well, because I feel like it kind of like made sense and it looked really nice. And it's not really something that I usually do, but I placed one on either side because it was sort of like a nice unique change to in comparison to like what I'm used to usually creating in most of my bathrooms. Yeah, so once I finished decorating this bedroom's ensuite area, we actually move on into the pool house area, which we actually turned into a very nice and simple gym area. So I actually utilized pretty much all of the functional gym equipment and objects that you can find in the game into this sort of like gym house area, which I feel like worked out really nicely because it was like the perfect shape and size. And I do actually go around the entire gym and just like change certain parts of the walls to like have different wall accents, because I feel like that would make it look a bit more interesting, along with like adding some nice mirrors and small simple clutter pieces that I thought were appropriate for a gym. And yeah, that seems to be pretty much it for this entire speed build. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think by leaving a like and subscribing, and comment down below what you guys think about this build. I would love to know your thoughts and suggestions down below in the comments. And I do also have a bunch more videos like this on the channel if you guys are interested in things like these. But thank you so much for watching again, and I'll see you guys in my next video.